Welcome to my channel. My name is Julia Billig. I'm not an art historian, but I have been studying European history and art for many years. This project is non-commercial and everything I do is for the soul. But I would be very pleased if you subscribe, share a link to my channel with your friends, like it, and leave your feedback about what else you'd like to hear about. Honestly, my last video about the Magi was supposed to be the last one this year, but after visiting the Gothic Modern exhibition at the Albertina in Vienna, I couldn't help but share my impressions of this very relevant exhibition that resonates so strongly with contemporary culture. So, Part 1. Gothic Modern. When the Middle Ages inspired the avant-garde. Imagine, the early 20th century. The age of machines, electricity, the avant-garde. Artists are shouting, "Down with the past, down with academicism." And suddenly, they return to the Middle Ages. But not to Raphael's elegant Renaissance, not to Rubens' pompous Baroque, but precisely to the Gothic, raw, frightening, emotionally exposed. Why did Edvard Munch, Gustav Klimt, Käthe Kollwitz, revolutionaries of modernism, suddenly turn to the art of the 15th century? The Gothic Modern exhibition at the Albertina in Vienna provides an answer to this question. This is not just an exhibition. It is a revision of the history of modernism. Part 2. What is Gothic Modern? Modernism was primarily a radical break with the long dominant academic tradition, and simultaneously with this break, many artists turned their gaze to a much earlier era, the Gothic period. In medieval art, they discovered subjects, motifs, and forms of expression that more closely corresponded to their own search for truth than the norms taught in academies. Modernism is not a break with the past. Modernism is a dialogue with the Middle Ages. In this extraordinary juxtaposition of artistic eras, Gothic Modern reveals how modernism was not so much a fundamental break with the past, as a movement in which purposeful interaction with late medieval art played a vital role. Part 3. The geographical context of the exhibition. Particularly in German-speaking and Northern European countries, this reconsideration of Gothic aesthetics manifested as part of the modern artistic worldview. In Germany and Scandinavia, the Gothic did not disappear. Gothic cathedrals stood everywhere. 19th century Romanticism had already rehabilitated the Gothic as a German style. Protestantism left an emotional void that Gothic expression filled. Around 1900, Vienna, an important center of modernism, embodied a living melting pot of these innovative artistic currents and a key node of transnational exchange between artists. Such figures as Akseli Gallen-Kallela, Käthe Kollwitz, and Edvard Munch exhibited at the Vienna Secession and entered into fruitful dialogue with the local art scene, while others, such as Max Beckmann and Helene Schierfbeck, came to Vienna in search of inspiration. Part 4. The exhibition's scenography. I cannot overlook the excellent organization and design of the exhibition. Two key design elements serve to structure the 7 exhibition halls. Firstly, a powerful color narrative on the walls, and secondly, the use of curved partitions to create separate spaces. Visitors begin their journey through the exhibition in a deeply black hall, where the darkness intensifies the intensity of the exhibited works. As they pass through subsequent halls, the intensity of shades gradually increases from burnt umber black to cobalt greenish black, and then to burgundy black. This progression culminates in bright red, rouge foncé, which transitions to copper mountain red in the next hall. The exhibition design makes an abstract reference to the principles of Gothic architecture. The ascending color narrative evokes an aspiration toward light, while the dynamic spatial composition softens the heaviness of the rooms. From the dark nave of a Gothic cathedral to the light of stained glass. Part 5. Main works at the exhibition. Section 1, Death or Memento Mori, Arnold Böcklin, Self-Portrait with Death as Fiddler, 1872. Böcklin depicts himself at an easel, with a skeleton playing the violin behind his shoulder. Death is not an enemy, but a musician accompanying the artist's life. The Gothic theme of Danse Macabre, but in a modern interpretation. Swiss symbolist Böcklin, 1827 to 1901, was one of the first artists to revive medieval death iconography for a modern audience. Unlike romanticized depictions of death, his skeleton does not threaten, it accompanies. This is not a warning about the end, but an acknowledgement that death is present in every moment of creativity. The violin refers to medieval images of music-making skeletons in Danse Macabre, where music was a metaphor for the inexorable passage of time. Böcklin creates a self-portrait of an artist who is aware of his mortality, and it is precisely this awareness that makes his creativity authentic. Vincent van Gogh, Skull with Burning Cigarette, 1886. The painting was usually regarded as a youthful joke. It appears that Van Gogh finished it in one session, and the cigarette smoke was one of the last additions. However, this intriguing work now receives a new interpretation in the context of Gothic Modern. Painted in Antwerp when Van Gogh was a student at the Academy, the work was long considered a cynical mockery, a memento mori with a cigarette, a symbol of modern vice. But the exhibition shows this is not a joke, but a serious dialogue with the Vanitas tradition. According to von Bonsdorff, director of Atheneum and a key figure of the entire Gothic Modern project, Skull illuminates the central fascination of Van Gogh's era artists with the theme of Danse Macabre, a literary and artistic established tradition explored by such masters as Michael Wohlgemuth and Holbein. Van Gogh studied anatomical skeletons at the Academy, but instead of an academic exercise, he created an existential statement. Even the dead smoke, the absurdity of modern life, where vices outlive the person himself. The green background and sharp brushstrokes anticipate his later expressionist style, and the idea itself, the skeleton as an acting character, comes directly from Holbein. Key point: what seemed like a joke by an Academy student is actually a direct dialogue with Holbein. Van Gogh does not mock death. He modernizes the medieval memento mori tradition for an age of nihilism. Marianne Stokes' Death and the Maiden, 1908. An amazing painting showing the despair of a young girl before death appearing to her. The irony is that Marianne copies the medieval subject of the Annunciation. Only the angel is black. Death is beautiful, inexpressibly sad, and at the same time infinitely calm. She wears a monastic headdress, which strengthens her image as a religious messenger. In her right hand, Death holds a lantern, not just an attribute, but a symbol of a guide illuminating the path to the underworld. Her blessing or comforting gesture of the left hand copies the gesture of the Archangel Gabriel from Annunciation scenes. The girl with despair and tears pulls on herself a bright red-orange coverlet, as if protecting herself with it, trying to hold on to it like her life. But death has already gently embraced her with her wing. On the bedside table lies a removed pearl necklace, and on the floor, fallen flower petals, symbolizing the inevitable withering of life. The composition of this painting is stunningly conceived. Death's rounded wings echo the semicircular frame of the painting, and they are opposed by the sharp line of the stretched canvas of the red coverlet. But the girl herself has already bent, repeating the line of the wing. This is the last second of her resistance, and the outcome is already inevitable. It's important to know that the painting was created in 1908 when Stokes was an active member of the Artists' Suffrage League and created banners for suffragist processions. The artist was a convinced supporter of the women's movement, and this position shines through in the painting. The early death of a young woman is read not only as memento mori, but also as the tragedy of unrealized potential, a woman's fate cut short. Some art historians even suggest that since the girl is in a nightgown and in bed, this might be only a dream about death, a nightmare, but this doesn't make the image any less poignant. Section 2. Golgotha and the Passion of Christ. Edvard Munch. Golgotha. 1900. Munch reinterprets medieval crucifixion scenes. A crowd of people at the foot of the cross, but instead of religious pathos, existential horror. Christ here is not a savior, but a symbol of human suffering. Painted at the turn of the century, Golgotha shows not the triumph of faith, but the collapse of hope. Munch removes everything divine, no angels, no light from heaven, no promise of resurrection. Only the crowd remains, faceless, indifferent, almost hostile. The faces of people at the cross are painted in Munch's characteristic manner, blurred, distorted, as if seen through the prism of psychological shock. The color palette is gloomy. Dark blue and brown tones create an atmosphere of hopelessness. The cross is almost lost in the composition. Christ doesn't dominate the scene. He is absorbed by the crowd. This is crucifixion without redemption, suffering without meaning, pure Gothic, cleansed of Christian hope. Pietà and maternal grief. The Gothic carving, the so-called Beaupart Pietà, from the Rhine region circa 1420-1430, shows Mary holding Christ's dead body on her lap. The Gothic Pietà differs from Renaissance versions, such as Michelangelo's, by the absence of idealization. Christ's body is not heroic but broken. Mary's face is not beautiful but distorted with grief. The wood is roughly carved, chisel marks are visible. This is not polished marble smoothness but raw materiality. Medieval pietas were created not for aesthetic admiration but for emotional participation. The viewer was supposed to feel Mary's pain. It is precisely this immediacy of emotion that attracted the modernists. Franz von Stuck, Pietà. 1891, Stuck radically reinterprets traditional Pietà iconography, reducing it to pure geometry of grief. Both figures are shown strictly in profile, Mary in an absolutely vertical position, head slightly tilted forward, face hidden in her hands. The halo around her head is simply a ring intersected by the top edge of the canvas. Christ has no halo. He is depicted as an ordinary dead man, in Holbein's tradition. The isolated figures are perpendicular to each other and reflect the contrast of life and death. Christ's body is three-dimensional, anatomically precise, and almost sculpturally real, while the shrouded Mary seems schematic, almost flat. The expression of emotions is conveyed through Christ's tightly clenched hand and Mary's gnarled fingers. The muscles of Christ's right arm are still tense, the hand convulsively clenched, a reminder of the nails of the cross and the passion. The Christian subject serves only as a pretext for exploring existential sensations, suffering and grief. Stuck creates a symbolist pietà yet devoid of all religious consolation. This is simply a mother and a dead son in absolute darkness. Käthe Kollwitz, Engravings on Maternal Grief. These emotional and political works are devoted, for example, to the trauma of war, the loss of a child, and grief. Kollwitz is a major name in the world. She lost her son Peter in the First World War, 1914, and her grandson in the Second World War, 1942. Her series of engravings, War, 1922, 1923, and the cycle Death, 1934, 1937, directly refer to medieval images of pietà and mourners. With her powerful engravings, Kollwitz relied on medieval images not only in form but also in content. Pain, grief, and the experience of loss are just as immediately palpable. Her technique, rough, scratching, repeats the unpolished quality of Gothic woodcuts. Faces in Kollwitz's work are almost faceless, masks of grief rather than individual portraits, as in medieval reliefs where emotion is more important than identity. Her work, Mother with Dead Son, 1903, is a complete removal of religiosity from the Pietà. No halos, no cross, only archetypal maternal grief. Kollwitz proves that Gothic iconography works even without religion, because it addresses universal human experience. Section 3. Madonna, from celestial to earthly. A series of Madonna paintings deserves mention, where old masters such as Baldung Green are juxtaposed with reinterpretations by 20th century artists such as Marianne Stokes and Paula Modersohn-Becker. Baldung Green created Madonnas with dual nature, simultaneously holy and sensual. His Madonna with Parrots, in 1533, shows a young woman with an infant surrounded by exotic birds, symbols of paradise, but at the same time Mary looks like a real 15th century German woman, not an idealized goddess. This earthly holiness, a Madonna who could be your neighbor, is exactly what the modernists were looking for. Baldung Green is also known for his erotic Madonnas, for example, Madonna with a bunch of grapes, where motherhood and sexuality are not opposed, but coexist. For the Victorian Academy, this was shocking. For the modernists, liberating. Marianne Stokes, Melisande, circa 1895. Stokes depicts the first scene from the symbolist play by Belgian playwright Maurice Maeterlinck, Pelléas and Melisande. Melisande sits by a stream in the forest, head bowed. She is dressed in a bright orange-red dress with richly ornamented sleeves. The patterns recall medieval manuscripts or Byzantine embroidery. Behind her is a forest painted like a tapestry or fresco with muted, seemingly faded tree figures. In the stream lies a crown. It has fallen into the water, but Melisande doesn't want to retrieve it. The crown in the water is the first symbol of loss, the first sign that this woman carries within herself mystery and tragedy. Stokes paints with tempera on canvas, a medieval technique revived by the pre-Raphaelites, which creates the effect of a fresco with a matte, muted surface. The work took 3 years, 1895-1898. Maeterlinck deliberately placed his modern psychological drama in the imaginary medieval kingdom of Allemonde. This is not historical reconstruction. It is a symbolist space where the Middle Ages becomes a language for expressing what cannot be spoken directly. Mystery, silence, fatal love, inevitable tragedy. This is the essence of Gothic Modern. The Middle Ages is not decoration, but a way to speak about things for which modernity has no language. Stokes combines the medieval tempera technique, Gothic ornamentation, tapestry stylized background, and symbolist atmosphere to depict modern theater. The play inspired Debussy, Schoenberg, Fauré, Sibelius, and Stokes was one of the first artists to visually embody this bridge between Gothic and modernism. Paula Modersohn-Becker, Madonnas. Modersohn-Becker reinterprets the Madonna as a real woman, a mother with physicality and emotions without idealization. The German artist, 1876-1907, who died at 31 from childbirth complications, created a series of self-portraits as Madonna. The most famous, Nursing Mother, 1902. This is a radical appropriation of religious iconography. Modersohn-Becker declares that any woman can be a Madonna, not through holiness, but through motherhood as such. Her technique, simplified forms, flat colors, refers to medieval book illuminations, but the body is painted with anatomical truthfulness. This is Madonna after Freud. Motherhood doesn't deny sexuality, but is its continuation. Section 4. Adam and Eve. The Fall and Sexuality. Lucas Cranach the Elder. Adam and Eve in Paradise. 1533. Gothic eroticism. Naked bodies, a serpent, an apple. Cranach creates sensual yet moralizing images. Cranach, 1472-1553, painted dozens of versions of Adam and Eve. This was one of his signature themes. In the 1533 version, Eve is depicted with an openly erotic body, thin waist, rounded hips, seductive curve. Adam looks at her with desire, not innocence. The serpent coils around the tree of knowledge. Cranach shows the moment before sin, but already filled with sexuality. The fall is not so much a moral choice as an inevitability of the flesh. The paradise landscape is detailed with German pedantry, deer, lion, plants, but the center of the composition is the naked bodies. This is not academic nudity, ideal, abstract, but Gothic, real, arousing. For the modernists, Cranach proved Christian art always knew about sexuality. It just hid it behind religious subjects. Max Beckmann, Adam and Eve, 1917. Beckmann creates a modernist version of the fall, preserving all biblical attributes but radically changing their tonality. Adam and Eve stand by a tree, flowers below, between them. The head of a creature, either a serpent or a dog. All elements of the paradise subject are present, but interpreted through the prism of expressionism and war trauma. Bodies are angular with sharp edges and deformed proportions. Faces grotesque, distorted. These are not idealized progenitors of humanity. These are exhausted, tense people. The space around them is flat, airless, claustrophobic. Despite the presence of paradise attributes, the tempter serpent transforms into an indeterminate creature, possibly a dog, which strips the scene of ambiguity. This is no longer a story about temptation and sin, but something darker and psychological. The flowers below don't create a sense of paradise, they rather emphasize the hopelessness of the situation. Beckmann, who survived World War I as a medic, sees the relationship between man and woman not as a romantic ideal, but as an inevitable, almost fatal connection. Adam and Eve here are not so much sinners as victims of their human nature, stuck in a space where even paradise attributes bring no consolation. Familiar Christian iconography was reinterpreted by many modernist artists, borrowing its expressive sharpness, giving it new relevance. Adam and Eve became archetypes of man and woman in the age of psychoanalysis. The fall, sexual awakening, expulsion from paradise, loss of innocence. The modernists used Gothic iconography as a ready-made symbol system. Edvard Munch, Ashes, 1894-95. The painting was also titled After the Fall. This title adds a biblical or mythological dimension to the motif. Munch creates a modern version of expulsion from paradise, not as a religious allegory, but as a psychological drama of relationships. The work depicts a critical scene of a couple's romantic encounter in the forest, which left the man bent in shame or dejection, and the disheveled woman, with wide-open eyes and motionless in disappointment or despair. This is the moment after physical intimacy, when passion has burned out, leaving only ashes. The woman stands in the center of the composition in a white dress, unbuttoned so that red underwear is visible. She fixes her hair, and loose strands still lie on the man, forming the contour of his head and shoulders, showing that she still dominates him. Her eyes are directed at the viewer, face marked by despair and emptiness. Munch's use of color in this period often has symbolic meaning. White is the color of innocence, while red symbolizes passion and love. Black, on the other hand, indicates grief and death. The man in black is hunched in the corner of the composition, his face hidden in his hands. This painting is perhaps one of Munch's most pessimistic works on the theme of man-woman relationships. It depicts the man as weak and defeated, while the woman is strong and victorious. The painting's title suggests that for some reason the heat of their passion burned out at this moment. Probably not coincidentally, the scene was painted at a time when Munch himself had a brief secret affair with Milithaolo, his cousin's wife, during which they also met in the forest. In fact, the artist later wrote on a lithograph of this work, "I felt that our love lay on the ground like a pile of ashes." The ashes motif is an image of absence. Absence of love, but also absence of interaction, communication, and joy of life. Mysterious is the horizontal form at the bottom in combination with the vertical border on the left with its wavy lines. These elements may be conceived as a symbolic boundary. This is Adam and Eve after the fall in Munch's interpretation. Not expulsion from paradise, but the impossibility of love after its physical realization. The biblical fall becomes a metaphor for the destructiveness of sexual desire, which, once satisfied, turns to ashes. The woman temptress becomes the woman victor, the man, a victim of his own passion. The forest is not a paradise garden, but a place of psychological catastrophe. Section 5. Finnish Artists, Death and Mythology, Hugo Simberg. The Wounded Angel, 1903. Two boys carry on stretchers a wounded angel with a bandaged head. Symbolism meets Gothic melancholy. Simberg created one of the most enigmatic paintings in Finnish art. The angel doesn't soar, but is wounded. Wings folded, eyes covered with a bandage, helpless. Two boys, in everyday clothing of the early 20th century, carry him on makeshift stretchers along a deserted road on the outskirts of Helsinki. This is a fallen angel in the literal sense. A heavenly being has fallen into the modern world and needs help. And this help comes from children, not adults. It seems that only in them is there still a drop of mercy. The painting reads as an allegory of faith's loss in the age of modernization. Angels are no longer all-powerful, they are wounded, and only children's compassion can save them. Look at how sorrowfully the first boy's lips are pressed and his face tense, and how accusingly the boy behind the angel looks at us. In his eyes, both reproach and question. But do we have an answer? The composition recalls medieval processions of holy relics, solemn, slow, mournful. Akseli Gallen Kalela, Ad Astra, second version 1907. The 1907 image is almost a copy of an earlier work from 1894 to 96, which Gallen Kalela conceived as a memorial to his daughter Impi Marjata, who died in infancy, and which served as a substitute altarpiece for the baptism of his younger children. In this work, stigmata are added to the raised hands of the resurrected female figure, and there's a parallel between the depiction of Lemminkainen and Hans Holbein the Younger's The Dead Christ in the Tomb, which Gallen Kalela admired. The work is made in triptych form, folding icon, a direct reference to Gothic altarpieces. The central panel shows a rising female figure, the mother of the hero Lemminkainen, from the Finnish epic Kalevala. Gallen Kalela, 1865-1931, synthesizes three traditions: Gothic form, triptych, Christian iconography, stigmata, resurrection, and Finnish mythology, Kalevala. The result is national art that is simultaneously European and Finnish. Gilding and bright colors refer to medieval icons, but faces and figures are painted with modernist simplification. Resurrection from the dead, but through the prism of Finnish mythology. Lemminkainen from the Kalevala. Lemminkainen's mother gathers pieces of her son's body, killed and dismembered, and resurrects him, like Mary mourning Christ, but with an active role. She doesn't just grieve, she acts. This is Pietà plus resurrection, Bach's maternal love as magic. Gallen Kalela shows that Gothic iconography is compatible with pagan myths, because all cultures have archetypes of death and rebirth. There are many works by Finnish masters at the exhibition, and I really want to tell about all of them. All without exception are magnificent, distinctive, and carry much philosophy of life, nature, and ancient tales. Section 6. Portraits. Faces Beyond Time. Helene Schierfbeck, The Seamstress, Das Working Woman. 1905. Schierfbeck creates a portrait that lies on the boundary between naturalism and abstraction and explores formal language, light, space, volume, not the model's soul. She told her models to look away while she painted them, demanded their silence, and refused to show them the final result. Models were important for starting work, but were later rejected when her inventive abilities came into play. The seamstress sits in profile, immersed in her work. The face is painted with extreme economy of means, several lines, minimal detail, but every brush stroke is precise. This is not a psychological portrait in the traditional sense. It's a study of form, light, silence. By mid-career, her mastery was connected to the materiality of work, testing the medium of paint slowly, adding and removing layers. The working woman is depicted with dignity, but without sentimentality. This is not social protest like Kollwitz and not decorative stylization, it's pure presence. Schierfbeck turns a simple seamstress into a meditation on labor, silence, and form. Marianne Stokes, Candlemas, circa 1901. The work was created after working in Holland and recalls Vermeer, as well as more modern impressionist depictions of Dutch village girls. The subject was also inspired by the pre-Raphaelites. Painted in medieval style using egg tempera, which is applied in small, careful strokes, the colors are muted but pure. The scene is simple. A woman reads prayers by the light of a blessed candle. There are 3 focal points: the prayer book, the candle flame, and the woman's face. There is no competition for our attention between them, and yet there is a subtle hierarchy. The candle illuminates the other 2, the face and the book. Without it, everything would be plunged into shadow. This is almost an icon. The woman is focused on prayer. The portrait becomes a meditation on light, faith, and the silence of domestic piety. Hans Holbein the Younger, Portrait of Simon George of Cornwall, circa 1535. Hans Holbein the Younger, court painter to Henry VIII, met the provincial nobleman Simon George of Cornwall in London. The portrait was commissioned for courtship purposes, as indicated by the carnation and clasp on the beret. The latter depicts Leda's union with Jupiter in the form of a swan, thus revealing the portrayed person's erotic intentions. Simon George is not just dressed in a luxurious costume of the latest fashion. He also chose one of the most modern portrait forms of the time, a profile image in tondo, derived from ancient coins. Holbein drew this image from life and used all his skill to accurately convey the portrayed person's profile. This is a portrait announcement, a young man seeking a bride, showing his wealth, education, ancient portrait form, and passion, carnation, and mythological clasp. Holbein captures with impeccable precision not only appearance but intention. Otto Dix, Self-Portrait, 1912. Otto Dix painted this precise self-portrait in 1912, foreshadowing a new approach to painting that he and other artists would fully develop in Germany after World War I. Characterized by intensified realism and devotion to portrait painting, this movement reflected disillusionment with pre-war expressionist idealism and became known as New Objectivity. The 21-year-old artist depicts himself in a dark brown corduroy jacket and with a hairstyle reminiscent of the medieval era, standing against a uniformly greenish background. Dix depicts in minute detail the texture of his clothing and his concentrated, even fierce, facial expression. The exaggerated expression of the model's appearance seems to declare his fierce determination and ambition. At 21, Dix made a bow toward the old master, painting himself in a similar motif. In this painting, we see an incredibly self-confident young man. Dix wasn't just imitating the old master. He portrayed himself as an old master. From the early 1920s, he devoted himself to studying old masters' painting techniques, using the layering effect created first by egg tempera and then finished with oils. This is a self-portrait as manifesto. A young artist declares himself heir to the Northern Renaissance tradition. Holbein, Dürer, Baldung. Medieval hairstyle, rigid profile, precision of execution. All this is a claim to a place in art history, made at 21 with astonishing self-confidence. Section 7. Modernism and its influence on artists. Here I want to tell about 3 works that seemed special to me. Egon Schiele, Neo-Gothic artist, male nude, 1912. Egon Schiele, whom critic Arthur Roessler described as a neo-Gothic artist, also uses expressive gestures in his depictions of the human body, which can also be found in radical figure representations in medieval art. Schiele never saw himself as a continuer of the Gothic tradition, but his contemporaries immediately recognized the connection. His nude figures, self-portraits or models, are depicted with the same angularity and distortion as Gothic crucifixions. Schiele's bodies are not ideal, like the Greeks or the Renaissances, and not destroyed, like the Expressionists. They are nakedly honest. Bones, tendons, irregular proportions are visible. Hands and fingers are exaggeratedly long, like Gothic saints, where hands symbolize the spiritual through the physical. Gothic connection. Angularity. No smooth lines, only broken contours, distorted proportions, head too large, limbs too long, emotional nakedness. Figures don't pose, they suffer or yearn. Absence of idealization. Bodies shown as they are. Thin, asymmetrical, imperfect. All this was already in Gothic altarpieces and crucifixes. Gothic sculptors depicted Christ as he was on the cross. Emaciated, distorted with pain. Schiele does the same with the modern body. He shows it without embellishment. Watercolor technique, quick, nervous, with pencil traces, creates a sense of incompleteness, like Gothic woodcuts. This is not a studio, but a confessional. Schiele doesn't draw the body. He exposes the soul through the body. Edvard Munch, Man in the Cabbage Field, 1916. Or the transformation of modernism. This is one of the most unexpected turns in Munch's career. The artist of the scream and ashes, master of existential anxiety and erotic nightmares, paints a peasant picking cabbage. By the early 20th century, Munch was already a famous artist, but his life was chaotic. Wandering through European capitals, alcohol, constant anxiety. After a week-long binge in Copenhagen, he was on the verge of breakdown and ended up in a clinic. Munch understood he needed to change. In 1909, he returned to Norway forever, and in 1916 bought the Ekeli estate near Oslo with a large garden that was previously a nursery. The surrounding fields, working peasants, horses, all this became new themes for his work. The composition is monumental and simple. The peasant is depicted strictly frontal, his figure inscribed in a powerful triangle. He holds armfuls of cabbage, breaking through the horizon line with his silhouette. This is not a portrait of a specific person. It's an archetype of labor, a generalized figure of the breadwinner. The painting was created in 1916 in the midst of World War I. Norway remained neutral, but the war forced a re-evaluation of 19th century industrial progress and a reminder of agriculture's importance. Munch's interest in rural life is connected to this historical moment. Broad color planes, turquoise against olive, light purple against brown, quick energetic brush strokes. All this differs from his earlier urban works with their sharp black and white contrasts. Munch continued to paint workers and peasants until the end of his life. In 1929, he wrote, "The workers' day is near." Together with Leger, he dreamed of an era of monumental public murals glorifying labor and calling for a better life for the people. This is not an escape from modernism. It's its transformation. Munch transfers monumentalism, simplified forms, expressive power of color from the sphere of psychological drama to the sphere of labor and land. The cabbage field becomes as important an existential space as the forest in ashes, only instead of burned out passion, affirmation of life through labor. Sascha Schneider, The Feeling of Dependency. Bridge between symbolism and expressionism. This is one of the cruelest allegories of addiction in late 19th century art. Schneider, who began as a symbolist, became an important bridge between 1890s symbolism and early 20th century expressionism. A naked man stands with his back to the viewer against a ghostly sky. His body is muscular, of ideal proportions, but his hands are bound by chains, and these chains are closed on themselves. They don't extend to the huge, dark creature on the right. This dark mass from darkness embodies what enslaves. This is the paradox of addiction. Physical strength is useless. Muscles don't break chains. The man is not turned face to his enslaver. He doesn't see him. Addiction is blind to its own nature. The mask reads as a demon, as the personification of passion, alcohol, drugs, any force that turns a free person into a slave. The dark mass from which it emerges resembles rocks or decomposing flesh, something primordial, ancient, but still powerful. It watches the man attentively, and there's even something sympathetic in its gaze. The hands roundly almost embrace the man's legs, but the circle isn't closed. The man can exit from it, but he's motionless. Schneider uses the language of Gothic masters. Allegory, demonic images, contrast of light and darkness. Medieval depictions of sins often showed a person chained to vice. But the treatment is already modern. Not religious morality, but psychological drama. There's no God who will save, only the man, chains, and mask. In symbolist language, the painting carries not only erotic subtext. Schneider was an openly homosexual man in an era when this was criminalized, but also a moral existential warning, how easily a person can become a slave to forces greater than himself. The work was part of the Zeichnungen series 1895, which included dark scenes, Triumph of Darkness, Judas Iscariot, Christ in Hell, Mammon and his slave, all exploring dark sides of human experience through Gothic imagery. Schneider was one of the most famous artists in early 20th century Germany, but the next generation almost forgot him because of the queer subtext of his works and Nazi repressions. In 2013 in New York, Schneider's first solo exhibition in the USA was held, an attempt to return a forgotten master who connected Gothic tradition with modernist sensibility. Part 6. Why is this important now? Gothic Modern began as an exhibition project before the pandemic and war in Ukraine, but opened precisely when its themes, death, suffering, search for meaning, acquired special acuteness. Curator Anna von Bonsdorf on the connection with Generation Z. They don't believe in fixed identity or paradise on earth, but the medieval Gothic worldview offers them something close, recognition of pain as part of life and longing for the spiritual, for greater meaning beyond the material. The exhibition resonates with a powerful wave of neo-Gothic in contemporary culture. Rick Owens and Alexander McQueen in fashion, Game of Thrones, and dark academia in visual culture. Dark wave revival in music. Gothic Modern for the first time explores this as an art historical problem. How modernists, from Munch to Kollwitz, turned to the Middle Ages in search of a language for existential questions. And this language proved prophetic. It speaks to us a century later. 3 main lessons of Gothic Modern. 1. Modernism is dialogue, not rupture. 20th century revolutionaries didn't destroy the past, they conversed with it. Munch looked at stained glass, Kollwitz studied pietas, Schiele repeated the angularity of Gothic figures. 2. Gothic want emotional truth. Unlike nostalgic romanticism, modernists drew from Gothic its expressive visual language, raw, unpolished. Gothic gave not beauty but truth, death, pain, sex, grief without embellishment. 3. Art history is a network, not a line 15th century, 20th century. Not influence but resonance. Same questions. What is death? What is love? How to live with pain? Gothic masters and modernists gave different answers. One pain through 5 centuries, without God, but with the same force. This is Gothic Modern. The exhibition is open until January 11, 2026. Visit it if you still have time. Happy New Year 2026.